Leon.
Hi, Ashley. How are you?
I am doing very well, my friend. It is lovely to see you. I can tell that we already have a handful of folks who are joining the stream. So, welcome to our audience. My name is Ashley with the Discover team here at Teachable. Would love to get started just by having you all let us know if you can see us and hear us, and also maybe give us a clue as to where you're tuning in from. Today, we are talking about global citizenship. It is only appropriate that we get a good geographic lay of the land here to see where we have folks tuning in from. So drop that in the comments if you're able. Leon, I'm so excited to have you here today. I recognize that especially in this moment, and this moment that's now been 2 years long or so, there have been adjustments to people's lives that have influenced how we think about work and lifestyle and travel. And I know that, at least in my community, there have been lots of people who have maybe for whatever reason decided that this is the moment that they're going to leave their office job and post up somewhere in a different part of the world that they've always wanted to go. And so I'm really looking forward to connecting with you today and hearing about your work and getting some tips, a peek behind the curtain for how people can build global citizenship and a lifestyle that allows them the freedom to explore. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction as well.
Yeah, it looks like we have, thank you, everyone. We have, perhaps unsurprisingly, we have folks from Germany, Israel, Austria, the US, Spain, Norway. Okay, so maybe we should just start a house swap with just the folks on this stream. That would be a good way to develop a foundation for global citizenship.
Well, as long as I can house swap with someone from a warm country, because living in Iceland, I'm kind of sick of the cold sometimes, and especially winter has started because it just started snowing today at home. So winter has officially begun.
Oh my goodness, snow already. I grew up in a place with 4 seasons, and I live in San Francisco in California now, which has sort of like one slightly variable season. So I always get excited about the idea of snow, and then I spend some time in it, and it's easy to get sick of eventually.
Yeah, it's not just the snow, but it's the darkness. In the middle of winter
Right.
here, we only get about 3 hours of daylight, and it gets very, very depressing.
Whew. But you grew up in Australia, is that correct?
I did. I spent the first 23 years of my life in Australia, never left the country, never went anywhere else. Didn't even have a passport until I was 22. And then I haven't lived in Australia since, and I'm now 36. No, that's not true. I lived in Australia for a very short period of time, for about 4 months. But yeah, for the last 13 odd years, almost 14 years, I've not had a home in Australia.
Okay, so there you have it. If you are one of those folks who maybe has not begun your globe trotting as of yet, don't fret, because Leon's here to tell us that it's not too late. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. For everyone who's watching on the stream right now, we're so excited to have you. If you have questions, feel free to drop those into the chat. I'll be popping on and off screen, but I'll be available in the chat to make sure that we address your questions with Leon as we go through the presentation today. There also will be a replay available, so you'll get an email notification from us about that, and you'll also be able to replay it on this YouTube stream here, which you're watching on now. And I would like to note that the link to Leon and Sorelle's course is pinned to the top of the comments on your YouTube page. I'll also be dropping it into the chat periodically, just so you have easy access to it. Speaking of Leon and Sorelle, we're so excited to be graced with this font of wisdom today, because Leon himself is a former consultant for lots of just massive global brands. and Sorelle, partner, right? You all co-founded your company together, is that right?
We did. We are partners in business and in life.
Lovely. And I know that you all are doing such big things right now, and Sorelle is working on. Was going to be here with us today, but duty calls, and you all are launching this new course, and so she's got other things to do, because this is what entrepreneurship is like, right? You have to divide and conquer.
Yes. Sometimes we'd like to do things more frequently together, but unfortunately, yeah, with the launch of our course coming up on the 1st of October, we have so much stuff to do. So Sorelle was going to pop in for the first 10 or 15 minutes, but that wasn't possible. So you've just got my face.
So we're happy to have that, but definitely check out, if you're not familiar with Sorelle's work. She is, another influencer, for lack of a better term. I think at one point I read this. I don't know if it's still true, but she's Iceland's most followed YouTuber. Is that right?
Correct. Most followed independent YouTuber. Only the band Kaleo has more subscribers on YouTube than Sorelle. So, yeah.
Amazing. And Leon has just extensive experience as a marketing consultant for some really impressive companies, ING, Volkswagen, and I think the Marine Corps, right? In the US.
Correct. Yeah, they were one of my first big clients when I was 24, I think. So it was a long time ago I worked with them, but yeah, they were one of my first big ones.
Amazing. So we're going to get a peek behind the curtain to see how Leon kind of transformed the marketing experience, maybe from a more traditional corporate lifestyle setup, into this global citizenship lifestyle that he and Sorelle have now. So really excited to have you all with us today. Definitely let us know if you have questions. And without any further ado, Leon, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that great introduction.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. So to everyone that's tuned in, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend some time with me. And hopefully I'm going to aim over the next 50 minutes or so to be as absolutely informative as I possibly can. I'm going to give you a quick little introduction about me and Sorelle as well, and who we are and what we do, as well as then I'm going to cover 4 main points of what I consider you need to do to become a global citizen. The first is to organize an independent income. The second is to create intelligent business structures around the world, for example, offshore companies and offshore bank accounts. The third is to acquire new citizenships and residencies to give you greater freedom of movement and choice. And the fourth is to organize investing on a global scale. So those are the main things that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to do my best to cover each of those for about 10 minutes each. So who am I? My name is Leon, as you already know, and my partner, both my fiance and my partner in business, Sorelle Amore, we have both been entrepreneurs for the vast majority of our lives. I started my first company when I was 23, and it went on to do more than $1 million in sales in the first 9 months, and set me off to becoming a self-made millionaire before I was 24. So in under a year, I became a self-made millionaire with my business. I have gone on to consult with some of the biggest companies in the world, like ING Bank and Audi and Volkswagen and the United States Marine Corps and the governments of more than 12 countries, as well as generating about $250 million worth of sales online for my clients. So what I'm trying to get at, long story short, is that I've sold a lot of stuff on the internet, and I'm quite good at it. And hopefully that's one of the big things that I want to teach you how to do today. My fiance, Sorelle, who's the other co-founder of Abundantia, she is, for want of a better term, an influencer. I don't really like that word, but Sorelle is the most followed person in Iceland. She's also an entrepreneur and became a self-made millionaire with her first business, or her second business, sorry, but the business that she runs now by the time she was 30. So we both succeeded pretty quickly, quite young. Not saying that there weren't challenges, and not saying we didn't have to give up a lot to do that in terms of things like free time or time with family, or making sacrifices, but we did it because it was important to us. One of the key philosophies that both Sorelle and I hold dear in our lives is the simple word of freedom. And despite the fact that a lot of us in today's world, we think we are free, I firstly want to smash a few misconceptions about how free we are. Now, I'm not going down the path of telling you we're going to live in some crazy oppressive society, because that is just not true. In many regards, we live in the most free time in human history. You have more freedom of choice than in many other times in history. For example, your grandparents or your great-grandparents, chances are that by the time that they were 18, they were expected to get married and already have kids. Chances are whatever they decided to do, whatever apprenticeship they decided to take on, by the time they were 18 or 19 years old, that's what they were going to do for the rest of their lives. And for the vast majority of human history, you died less than 100 kilometers away from where you were born. Most humans did not travel to the extent that we do today. And most humans didn't have the freedom of choice that we do today. So in certain regards, we are much more free than at any other time in human history. But in other regards, we are not as free as other times in human history. And one of those is in terms of the freedom of movement that we have. Now, yes, as I've said, we have much more disposable income these days, and we have much more of a choice to be able to go, well, I want to get up tomorrow and book a plane ticket and go somewhere else. As long as you've got the money and you've got a decent enough passport, you have the ability to do that. But more than 100 years ago, the vast majority of human history, passports didn't even exist. So as long as you were choosing a country that your home country wasn't necessarily at war with, and you had the money to be able to travel, you could basically pick up your life and you could move to another country, and you didn't need a passport, you didn't need anyone's permission, you could move freely around the world. The reason that people didn't do it is because the world was, one, a bit of a strange and confusing place, and two, most people didn't have the disposable income that we do today. And over the last 100 or so years of human history, we have been hit with more and more and more and more rules and regulations that stop us from doing certain things. So, for example, 150 years ago in the United States, you didn't need permission from the government to start a business. You didn't need permission to get married. You didn't need permission to start a business. You didn't need permission to drink raw milk, for example. You didn't need permission to own a firearm. You didn't need permission to do a lot of things. Now, I'm not saying that some of these rules and regulations aren't there for great reasons. Many of them are. But what I want to express to you is that in some regards, we are less free than our great-grandparents. Now, one of the ways that I love to illustrate this point, and one of the reasons that I really want you to dedicate your life to freedom, because I know from my point of view, when I decided to make freedom the most valuable thing in my life, it changed my world forever. And I'm not saying there aren't some things that you won't have to do. Now, of course, you need money to achieve a certain level of freedom. But one of the things that I'd like to illustrate to you to show you that you may not be as free as you think is the simple fact that when you are born today, you are born into a country that has a very specific set of rules, very specific economic rules about how you can start a business or do business, very specific travel rules about the way that that country's passport allows you to travel around the world in terms of visas and where you're legally allowed to live and work. Very specific rules in terms of foreign relations about the partnerships that your country has. Now, what most people do is most people are born with the passport that they have in the country that they're in, and they never really consider about the options that they have in terms of freedom. The way that I look at it is that most people are born in a city that has 200 different restaurants in it. But for most of their lives, they choose to eat at one restaurant for the rest of their lives. They think, well, I'm going to do business in my country. I'm going to choose to bank in my country. I'm going to choose to think of my country as where I sell my products. I'm going to think of my country as the place that I really only have the option to live for the rest of my life or buy property. And that's just not the case. You have 200 restaurants effectively, because there are almost 200 countries on the face of the earth as I speak these words today. Each one of these countries has its own set of rules when it comes to what you get in terms of free travel and where you get to live, in terms of economic ties, in terms of business rules, in terms of banking, in terms of business opportunities. And what most people do is they live and work in one country and choose to live by those rules. Now, what I'm saying is that you can, like me, live in Iceland. I choose to live in Iceland not because of tax benefits or necessarily because of business opportunities, because Iceland is not a great country for those. It is a great country because I love the insane nature of this place. However, I choose to set up companies in other countries in the world where I get better opportunities in terms of banking or taxation. I choose to set up a business that has global scope, where my customers can come from any country on the planet. I choose to buy property and invest in countries all around the world. Basically, what I'm saying is start to look at the rules and regulations of every country on the planet as rules and regulations that you are able to choose from and opportunities that you are able to choose from. Now, I'm not saying some of these opportunities are going to be easy. For example, setting up a company in China for the vast majority of people is very difficult because of China's rules. But the Chinese economy has such a scope for you to make potentially an insane amount of money because it is so untapped from the outside world. For example, there are many people that never consider about getting residency in another country or citizenship of another country because they think it's too difficult unless they were born with it. However, that is just not the case. And in one of the later sections in this seminar, I'm going to show you how many opportunities there are for you to get a second, third, or fourth citizenship. I'm actually currently working on my fourth right now, and how easy that it potentially can be and the different ways of doing that. So that's my introduction, and that's what I consider, what you should be considering when it comes to choosing what I consider true freedom, choosing where you want to live, where you want to do business, where you want to set up a company, where you want to have your home base or multiple home bases, and where you want to choose to have citizenship and residency. Don't be tied in to just where you were born and those borders, thinking that those are the things that tie you down, because still today, most people look at the borders of the country that they were born in as the borders that they choose to select their opportunities around. And I'm going to tell you that it's just not the case. So I want to get into section 1, and what in my mind is the very first pillar of creating true freedom, and that is generating an independent income. Now, all of the other things that I'm going to say in this seminar, creating intelligent business structures and legally lowering your tax, acquiring additional citizenships and residencies, and investing, all of these things become much easier when you organize point number 1 well. And point number 1 is generating an independent income. Now, generating an independent income is exactly as it sounds, an income that you choose for yourself, an income that is not tied down to employment, to hours, to clients that you don't want to work with, or a boss that you hate dealing with on a daily basis. Basically, an income that you get to call the shots on. Now, there are many, many ways of doing this, and it's going to be very hard for me to cover this section in 10 minutes. And so often, Sorelle and I have people coming to us and saying, I have no idea what I would do to start a business. I have no idea what opportunities are available to me. And the way that I usually kind of illustrate how many opportunities there are available for you to create a business or an income today is think of all the businesses that have ever existed in human history. Builders, plumbers, artists, currency exchanges, bankers, every single standard job that has existed throughout human history. All of those jobs and those businesses, they all still exist today. The difference is, over the last 20 years, with the invention of this fantastic thing called the internet, is that we now have, in the last 20 years, we have more jobs that have been created over the last 20 years due to the internet than have ever existed before in human history. And that's an insane thing to think about. All of the other jobs and all of the other ways that someone in the past has become successful, become a millionaire or a billionaire, they all still exist. But now there is this insane pool of you being able to generate an income called the internet. Now, I'm not saying you have to use the internet to generate an independent income, but I do believe you need to use the internet to generate an independent income if you truly want to be free and location independent. Now, one of the big things that people look for first and foremost when they decide that they want to live and work somewhere else and call the shots in their own life is becoming a digital nomad. Basically starting a business that you can operate from a computer anywhere in the world. You can choose 1 month to be on a beach in Bali, the next month to be, in Istanbul, the next month after that to be in Estonia. Whatever you choose, many people seek out first to become a digital nomad. And I think that is a very intelligent choice. But where do you go deciding what you're going to start or what you're going to do? Now, the first thing that I think is the first place to look in terms of generating an independent income, and something that I know the people from Teachable very much agree with, is turning your existing knowledge into a business. Now, Sorelle and I are course sellers. It's something that we've done for a long time, selling digital products and courses, and we really believe in it. One, because the profit margins are extremely high. You don't need to generate a physical product. You don't need to ship anything around the world. And instead of buying and manufacturing something and selling it to someone, where your profit margins might be 5, 10, 20% at best, with courses, a lot of the time, you're making 90% of everything that you sell. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And I believe to a certain extent, everyone can take the existing knowledge or the skills that they have, regardless of what those knowledge or skills are. It could be you're really great at knitting. You are great at painting or teaching people how to paint. You have a passion for collecting cards, or I don't know, Warhammer 40,000 miniatures, or whatever it is. You have something that you care about. It might not be something that you're fantastic about, but it's something that you are, at least to a big percentage of the population, more knowledgeable about. You can turn that into a business. The problem that I see when most people take this route is that they think that, well, I can just turn any one of my skills into a business. And that is true to a certain extent. But what you really have to focus on is, what is the problem that you can solve with the knowledge that you have? If you're really great at knitting, okay, I have a course or some videos online teaching people how to knit. Fantastic. But what can you do? What problem can you solve for other people that are trying to learn how to knit? Can you cut down the time it takes people to learn, to get reasonably good at that skill, from 6 months to 1 month? That is a very actionable thing that people would pay for. Can you teach people how to solve complex knitting problems? Really wrong way of me describing this, in a much easier way. You need to figure out what is the problem you are solving for someone. And generally, the bigger the problem you can solve, or the more people you can solve that problem for, the more money that you will make. Now, there are 3 C's, or what I call the 3 C's, of turning the existing knowledge or skills that you have into a business. And these are the 3 main things that I see that are usually the easiest point from A to B in generating an independent income. And the 3 things that you can sell are courses, consulting, or coaching. So generally speaking, when most people are going out to turn their existing knowledge into an online business, these are the 3 things that I think you should focus on. Courses, you're here watching a Teachable presentation. I don't have to explain to you what a course is. It's a product where anyone can go and take your learning experience at any time of the day. Consulting. Consulting is generally when you give your advice or expertise to companies or people that are really in need of that information. Generally, more often than not, dedicated to companies. Now, consulting is great if you have a very specialized or technical skill. You are a web developer, and you can teach a company's own web developers how to cut down their time from getting A to B. That's a skill that a company will pay a lot of money for. You are a marketing consultant, formerly like what I did with huge companies. I taught big businesses how to do certain aspects of digital marketing better. And sometimes I was getting paid $50,000 per week for that. Admittedly, some of the companies that I was working for were some of the biggest companies on earth. But if you have a skill that is relatable to a company, especially big companies, you can earn a ridiculous amount of money. But a lot of people think when it comes to consulting that the only way to make money as a consultant is if you have a very specific business skill. Something, again, like marketing, like accounting, operations people. And that's just not true. I met a consultant in Australia who was making $25,000 a month selling consulting services about mindfulness and meditation to large companies around Australia. She was basically teaching companies and their staff how to take 5 to 10 minutes out of their day and implement mindfulness practices into those companies' daily practices for their staff. Now, you might think this is something esoteric and something that a company would not pay a lot of money for. However, all she had to do to prove with one case study was that she enabled one company to prove that their employees said that they were more relaxed and more productive and they liked their jobs more. And she did that initial consultation with a company for free to get proof of concept. Out of the 100 or so employees, after she taught them meditation and they were taking 5 minutes out of their day to meditate during work, out of the 100 employees, more than 80% of those employees reported to their employer that they felt calmer, more productive, and they loved their job more. That company wrote a report for her, and then she started pitching that to other large companies. She was making $25,000 a month, usually working for no more than 2 companies every month. So even if you think that you don't have a skill that is necessarily immediately relatable to large companies, you can make money out of consulting. Now, the third C is coaching. I'm sure, again, you know what coaching is. Helping people with problems. No matter what kind of human being there is out there, we all have a problem we're trying to solve. We are trying to solve relationship issues with our partners. We are trying to solve the problem of getting more direction in our life, getting fitter, learning to read faster, learning a language, learning how to paint better, learning how to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, that there is some human being out there, some individual human being out there that is probably looking to get better at what you know how to do, either something that you're skillful or knowledgeable about, or something that you are passionate about. So what I normally recommend to people, and again, I'm trying to cram as much as I can into this 10-minute part of the seminar, there is something that you are either very good at, very passionate about, or knowledgeable about. My recommendation is, when you are looking to generate an independent income, take what that thing is and see if you can monetize that in some way. Now, a lot of what people get stuck on is they go, okay, I am very passionate about Pokemon cards. That's the only thing that I'm good at or passionate about. I have no idea how I could turn that into a business. The first thing that you do is find other people that have already achieved success in that area. Immediately off the top of my head, I know there are people with YouTube channels and blogs that are experts about Pokemon trading, that talk about which cards are valuable. There are people that consult with this. I mean, for example, Logan Paul was just here in Iceland. He left 2 or 3 days ago, and Sorelle hiked to the top of the volcano with him. He has his own personal Pokemon card expert consultant that tells him what to buy. There are people that buy and resell Pokemon cards for profit. I'm just giving you one example of something that you may not think that could be turned into a business, and I guarantee that there is. Find the people that are already succeeding in that industry with that thing that you're passionate about, and lead by their example, and then try and see what you can do better. How can you serve more people better than they are? How can you do something differently, selling that knowledge or passion or project to other people that will make you stand out? How can you wow people? How can you overpromise and underpromise and overdeliver to more people with that passion or that business or that product or that service? What I'm trying to get at is that you will come up with excuses, or you will come up with, well, yeah, sure, I'm great at this thing, but I don't know how to turn it into a business. I guarantee that there is a way. I almost guarantee in almost everything there is an absolute way. So this is a huge thing that Sorelle and I have covered in previous courses before, of how to turn your knowledge into an online business. It's very hard for me to, again, focus on this for more than 10 minutes, but those are the 3 things that I would focus on: coaches, courses, consulting, and try and figure out what it is that makes you, what are you better at than even 10% of the population, and try and turn that into something first. I don't also recommend that you quit your day job immediately if you have a day job and focus on something like this full time. There are a lot of gurus out there, a lot of people trying to sell you a $3,000 course that basically the aim of it is to just get you to sell their products and earn a commission. And most of them are telling you to quit their day job and just go for it. I'm big on going for things, but in today's world, especially the last 2 years, have showed us that we are less secure in many areas than we previously thought. So if you have a day job, if you have something that pays your bills right now, do that. Keep doing that. Can you spend 3 or 4 hours a night working on something that is going to give you ultimate freedom in terms of finances? Is that worth it? Is it worth grinding on something else for 3 or 4 hours a day for a year, 6 months, 3 months to get you out of that and give you freedom? Something that can replace 70% or 100% of your income before you decide to get out of it, work on it full time? That's worth it to me. And like I said, Sorelle and I both became self-made millionaires quite young, but we're not going to lie to people that we didn't have to sacrifice things. While my friends in Australia were going out getting drunk 3 nights a week, I had to most of the time say no. While people were spending long weekends just sitting at the beach and doing nothing. And admittedly, Australia is a great place for that. I had to say no. And now, at 36 years old, admittedly, it happened a lot younger for me. It happened by the time I was 25, but by 25, I was free. I was completely free. So you may have to sacrifice some things to achieve what you want to do in terms of the first pillar, the finance pillar. But trust me when I say it's worth it. It is worth it more than you could possibly imagine. Just being able to choose your own hours. My big first goal was never to become a millionaire. My goal was I wanted to know that every time I put an ATM card in an ATM, I wanted to know that no matter what amount that I pressed on that to pull out of that ATM that I needed for that day, that I would never have to look at a bank statement. It was never to become, to be making a couple of $1 million a year. That was never a goal. It was just, I never wanted to have to worry about money. I saw how badly my mum struggled when I was a kid. After my mum kicked my dad out, she was poor. And I mean, like, broke. My mum used to put a stock cube, like a chicken bouillon cube, into a bowl of water and tell us that was soup. That's how broke we were. And I think my desire just to not ever have to worry about money came from that. You don't need a lot to achieve ultimate freedom. For most people, it's a couple of $1,000s a month. Trust me, when I was making $5,000 a month on my own and not having to work for anyone else, I felt more free than I ever had in my entire life. So don't think I'm saying this from a position of someone that makes a lot more money than $5,000 a month, but you need less than you think to feel like you have ultimate freedom and that you don't have to work for someone ever again. So not saying don't aim big if you want to, but you won't need much to achieve the first pillar. Now with that, I'm going to move on to the second pillar, which is creating intelligent business and offshore structures to legally lower your tax. Now, again, I want to go back to the principle of most people are born and live in an ecosystem that they think that they're stuck with, the rules of their country, the tax rules, the business rules, the banking rules of their own nation. And I'm here to tell you that you don't need to be stuck within those rules. Now, the first thing that I want to address is that when I start talking about legally lowering your tax, this is the topic that Sorelle and I have had most pushback on more than anything that we have ever spoken about. Now, some people, and I get where you're coming from, some people just believe that we should all just be good citizens, that if our government tells us we need to be paying 45% a year of our salary in tax, that we should just pay it. We shouldn't even worry about trying to legally deduct our taxable income. Because if you don't do that, then you are not being a good fellow man. You are not doing what you need to for your country's survival. And I'm here to tell you that that is wrong. I strongly believe that the mentality that we should just not ask questions and pay the tax that we're supposed to pay and not think about banking offshore or doing business offshore, I think that the mentality that makes us feel guilty about that is by design, because no government wants their citizens paying less tax. And I want to use a point to illustrate this. And the point that I want to use is the point of Australia. Now, Australia is the most mineral-rich piece of land on the face of the planet. There is more mining wealth in Australia than any other place on Earth. And that's because Australia is one of the oldest rocks on Earth. And what we know geologically is that when you let rocks fester in their own soup for a long period of time, that you get things like oil and gas and diamonds and gold and silver and iron ore and all the things that our society needs to survive. Not saying these practices of mining these things isn't damaging to the environment, but let's face it, mineral wealth these days is wealth. Now, of the 10 biggest mining companies in Australia, in 2018, 7 of these 10 companies made a collective $50 billion in revenue that year. And collectively, they paid $0 in tax to the Australian government. Nothing. What they did pay, however, is they paid several $1 million a year in lobbying money to the government. So the government would write the rules that allowed these companies not to pay tax and then ship the profits overseas. 7 out of 10 of these companies were foreign companies, and none of that went back to the Australian people. Now, obviously, we can all agree that that is wrong. But if the largest companies in Australia aren't paying for the tax that is required for schools and health and education and roads and all of that kind of stuff that we need to live in a very, wealthy country like Australia, then it's reliant on small people, on people that are earning a 9-to-5 job and minimum wage. And I don't think that's fair. Now, what we know historically, and I'm not going to go into too many examples, but when large companies are forced to pay an even amount of tax, then what happens is that the tax kind of becomes even, that the people who are paying the vast majority of the tax and companies who are paying basically nothing, it kind of evens out. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, what happens historically is that when the vast majority of the people start paying less tax, the government has to forcibly go to look for more money. And generally that comes from large companies. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the things that large companies are doing to legally lower their taxable income are things that I believe that you should be doing as well, because it's only fair. And I believe that we should all be paying a fair amount of tax. And when more people like you and me are educated about how you can legally lower your taxable income. Now, I'm not talking about tax evasion because that's illegal, but legally lowering your taxable income, then governments will be forced to make an even playing field for everyone. And that's what I believe is fair. Now, there are many ways that you can legally lower your taxable income. Now, the route, what I call a structure that most people have in their life, is a structure of 3. You get paid from someone. It's either your employer or clients. That goes to you into your bank account, and then you spend it. And this is the structure that most people live under, regardless of whether you're self-employed, whether you have a company, or whether you are employed by somebody. Now, what is a better way is potentially you could have a separate company that owns most of your things. For example, a company that you own can own your house, it can own your car. And as a very broad general way of speaking, these things then become tax deductions if they're a business expense. Your company can, if there is a reason for it. For example, in my case, Sorelle and I don't own this house. This house is owned by our company. And so everything in this house, whether it's the maintenance on the house, the electricity, the internet, it all becomes a tax deduction. It all becomes an expense that we can then write off on tax, providing there is a legitimate and legal reason. So you can't just buy a house under a company and then think that you can just tell your government, well, it's my company's house, and then write everything off on it. You need to have a legal reason. Now, this is not only our place of business, but this is also a recording studio. This is also a place where we store all of our company's products, all of our company's property that we use to record and work out of. It's very easy for us to show that this is a legal business expense. Now, you can, and again, this is a very hard thing for me to cover in such a short period of time, but you can create many different types of structures that help you legally lower your tax. Offshore companies, for example, offshore bank accounts, changing your legal tax residency, which is something that I'll cover in the residency and citizenship section, are all things that can enable you to legally lower your tax. Now, one thing that people think of is immediately that if you own an offshore company or if you own an offshore bank account, that immediately that becomes invisible to the country that you live in. And that is definitely not the case. For every company that I have abroad, I have to legally register it with the Icelandic government. Iceland, even though I'm an Australian citizen, Iceland is where I live. It is my home. And legally, I am a tax resident of Iceland. So if I have a company abroad and that company makes money, or if I have a bank account abroad, or if I have gold or silver or cryptocurrency abroad, I have to legally show that to the Icelandic government. If I don't, then I am committing tax avoidance or tax fraud, which is an offense. Now, for example, a great example of this is Hong Kong. Hong Kong is one of the places that Sorelle and I have talked about a lot, which is a great place for many people to set up an offshore company. To set up a company in Hong Kong costs you less than $200-300. Almost anyone can open a company in Hong Kong without setting foot in the country. And in Hong Kong, if you don't live there and you operate a company there, anything that company earns is 0% tax. There is 0% tax on that company. So most people just think, well, I just set up a company in Hong Kong, I run my business through that, and I never have to pay any tax. But there's a big problem with that. If you're operating that company from your home country, for example, in my case, Iceland, or if I was operating that from Australia, the law of the country that I'm in states that if I'm operating a company primarily from the country that I live in, that they consider that company's revenue as taxable in the country that I live in. So in that case, there are many things that you have to be careful about. And this is one thing that most people don't consider. And I think is also one of the biggest barriers that people don't think about. They don't think that, well, as long as I'm not hiding that money, but if I'm paying tax legally there, I'm not actually committing an offense in my country. But for me, for example, with a company in Hong Kong, I still have to pay tax on that company in Hong Kong legally to the Icelandic government. And if I don't, I'm committing an offense. So there are many ways, as I'll cover also in the next section, of how you can legally change your tax residency. Generally, your tax residency is where you live, not where you do business, not where your company is. It is where you live. And if you're operating a company in another country, generally you still have to pay tax on that company's profits in your country. So it doesn't get you out of it. But what I would recommend, and this is something that Sorelle and I, again, were talking about in our course, not saying that you have to buy it, something that we speak about on the Sorelle Amore Finance YouTube channel, and something that we will be heavily covering in blogs on our new website starting from next month, is options on where you can go abroad, where you can live, where you can work, where you can set up companies and business structures that will help you legally lower your taxable income. Now, Iceland is not the place to do that. I live in this country because I absolutely love it. And if you want to come to Iceland and think you'll save tax money living in this country, I don't recommend it, because it has some of the highest personal tax in the world at about 47%. Company tax is a bit better, it's about 20%. But as a great example, if I was running my business as a solo entrepreneur here in Iceland, I would be paying about 47% tax. Just by switching my enterprise over to a company, which has 20% tax, I'm paying less than half the amount of tax that I would before. So this is a very simple thing that you can look into. Where is it better for you to do business? Where is it better for you to live to pay less tax? Now, this leads me into the third pillar of freedom, which is acquiring new citizenships and residencies. Now, I saw someone in the chat earlier on saying they were here from Austria. And hello to you. I think your name was Caroline. I can't remember. But I have a very personal story about Austrian citizenship. So I am a first-generation Australian. I'm the first person in my whole family born in Australia. Most of my family are originally from Austria. Now, a lot of people these days that are born with a European passport know how valuable having a European passport can be. Me being born as an Australian, I have a decent passport. I have one of the best country passports on earth when it comes to free travel and work. But in saying that, I can't live and work anywhere in Europe that I decide for the rest of my life. As an Austrian, I could, and that's if I was able to acquire an Austrian passport. Now, many people don't realize that they are eligible for multiple passports and never even consider it, but most people don't ever consider how valuable another passport can be. Now, let me give you an example of Australia again. Now, as an Australian citizen, like I said, I have one of the most powerful passports in the world, but what COVID has showed me is that, for example, over the last year and a half, Australia is one of the only countries on the face of the planet that not only denied foreigners from entering, but Australia also denied Australian citizens the ability to freely enter and leave their own country. Now, me as an Australian passport holder, if I was the citizen of only one country, this would be a very, very, very big problem for me. Citizens of dual citizens never had to worry about this. There was a great example of a dual German and Australian citizen who tried to leave Australia early last year, and the Australian government said, no, you can't leave because you're Australian and we've closed the borders. That citizen was very quickly able to call the German embassy, and the German government very quickly put pressure on the Australian government and said, you can't stop one of our citizens from leaving your country. So the Australian government had to give up. Now, this is just one example of what having multiple passports can do, how valuable it is to have multiple citizenships. There may be situations in our lives, and yes, we have lived in one of the most peaceful times in human history, but the last year and a half can show you that you may not be as peaceful or as freely able to travel as you like. If you have multiple citizenships or passports, it opens up many more doors. Now, unfortunately for me, my mother came to Australia as an immigrant. But the problem was she became an Australian citizen 2 years before I was born. Now, Austria has some of the most strict citizenship requirements on the face of the planet, and Austria does not allow dual citizenship. So when my mum became an Australian before I was born, technically when I was born in Australia, I did not have an Austrian mother anymore. I had an Australian mother. Now, if my mum had waited 2 more years, being born in Australia to an Austrian mother, I would have been born with 2 passports. But the Austrian government, unfortunately, doesn't look at it that way. Sorelle, on the other hand, was born in Australia to Polish parents. And because Poland allows dual citizenship, Sorelle was born with 2 passports immediately. Now, those 2 passports have allowed Sorelle to have 2 of the most valuable passports on earth. Australia, which gives you easy access to most of the West and Asia, and Europe, which is extremely valuable, having a European passport. Now, there are many ways that you can acquire multiple citizenships or residencies, and I can't cover in depth all of these ways. The first thing is citizenship by naturalization, which I'm in the process of doing here in Iceland as we speak. Now, naturalization is simply as it sounds, where you move to somewhere where you live there for a long enough period of time, and then after a certain amount of years, could be 7 years as it is here in Iceland, they consider you having lived there for long enough that you can acquire citizenship from that country. Now, that is a great thing. It's an amazing thing, and it will enable me next year, after I'm able to apply, to have another passport. You can do this in many countries around the world. The problem with it is it's generally free, but it does take time. You will have to move somewhere and you will have to live there permanently, but this is a way that's open for almost anyone. The second way that you can acquire another citizenship is citizenship by descent. Now, as I said, Sorelle was given another passport, even though she was not born in Poland and she didn't live there until she was 7. She was enabled legally to have a second citizenship in Poland by birth because of Poland's laws. Now, I found out recently that I am eligible for citizenship in the Czech Republic due to the fact that my grandfather was Czech, and I'm literally going through the process right now with lawyers to acquire my Czech passport. So even though I initially didn't think until I was 33 years old that I had an avenue for the Czech Republic, a little bit of digging made me realize that I was. So there are a lot of people out there. For example, a friend of mine here in Iceland, Kiana, her mum is from the Philippines. She, her whole life, thought that she was only eligible for an American passport where she was born. I asked her one question that she never considered, and now she realized that she is eligible for a second passport that she's going to apply for very quickly. The third way that you can apply for citizenship, well, just getting onto that point, what I recommend is looking into your family history to see if there is any way possible. Do you have a parent, a grandparent, or in some cases, as in the case with Ireland or a few other countries, that you can get citizenship as far back as a great-grandparent? Now, the third way that you can acquire citizenship, which is going to be out of reach for many people at the start, is citizenship by investment. Now, this is simply put where you need to buy your way into citizenship. But for many people, this can be the fastest way of getting another passport. You can acquire citizenship, for example, by buying $250,000 worth of property in Turkey, and then they'll give you citizenship. You can pay about $100,000 from a Caribbean island like St. Lucia or Grenada, and they will literally, a donation to the government, they will give you another passport. Again, this is going to be out of reach for many people. But there will come a time where you may think that this is a worthwhile investment. And Sorelle and I, over the last 6 months, have decided this is a worthwhile investment for us and is something that we are now going through with a country. The other way that you can apply for get citizenship quite quickly, especially in a couple of cases in Central or South America, is by having a child in another country. Now, for example, in Mexico or Brazil, if you have a child in Mexico or Brazil, your child will immediately become a citizen of that country. And you as the parent of that child will get expedited citizenship within 1 to 3 years. So that can be a very fast route for people to get citizenship. Now, they're the main ways of acquiring citizenship around the world. Now, an easier way is that can allow you more freedom. And again, a way that can help you get more business opportunities and to legally lower your tax is by getting residency somewhere. Now, generally speaking, unless you are from Eritrea or America, the 2 countries on earth where unfortunately you are taxed on your worldwide income, even if you've never lived there, even if you've never stepped foot in that country, even if you don't care about that country, if you're from Eritrea or America, moving somewhere will not help you save money on tax because America wants its tax money on all of your worldwide income, and so does Eritrea. But for everyone else, the simplest way of lowering your tax and changing your tax residency is simply by moving, because in most countries in the world and for most citizenships, where you live permanently is where you are considered to have your base and where you are taxed. Now, there are some amazing opportunities for residency around the world. And in most cases, to get residency in another country is much, much more simple than get citizenship. You can get residency by going and studying somewhere. You can get residency just by showing that you have more than $1,000 a month in income coming in, as is the case with many countries, especially in Central or South America. You can get residency based on family ties. You can get residency based on getting a business visa or wanting to start a business in that country. But what's even better, and what's one of the easiest paths to success these days, is that there are many countries, especially since this whole crisis happened in the last year and a half, that have really pushed through nomad visas where you can go and live and work in a country for sometimes years, just proving that you have an online business. Now, a great example is Croatia. Croatia has just started up a digital nomad visa, and Croatia is a phenomenal place to live. Well, I can imagine it's a phenomenal place to live based on what I've seen of the country from visiting there. Croatia is in Europe. It is relatively cheap. It has some of the most phenomenal beaches in the world, and it has a great quality of life. Croatia will give you a digital nomad visa for up to a year. And when you're legally registered as living in Croatia during that year, Croatia will give you up to a year of paying zero tax, no tax whatsoever. You can live in Croatia, you can work in Croatia for a year, no tax. You just have to show that you've got a reasonably small online business that's generating regular income, and they'll give you the right to live in Croatia. And after living there for a year, you can then extend it based on a couple of different criteria. There are many countries around the world. Estonia is another great example that has a digital nomad visa. But there are many countries around the world that as long as you can show that you have a modest online business, they will give you residency to live and work in that country. Now, a lot of people think that just by being a digital nomad that you can go and live and travel. And if you just keep moving, that you won't have a home base or a specific country of residency, that means that you don't have to pay any tax. And that's just not the case. Now, what I want to do is give you the example of Australia again. Now, Australia, there are a lot of Australians that live as digital nomads and just travel the world permanently. They don't have a home in Australia. They don't have a home anywhere. And they think that that gets them out of either paying tax at all or legally lowering their tax to Australia. Australia says that if you don't have another legal home base in another country where you are a legal resident of, then by default, you have to pay tax back to Australia. And the problem is you could probably get away with something like this for a few years. Eventually, they will catch up to you. And governments with the rise of electronic tracking, whether it's your banking or your passports, they are getting really, really, really good at catching people that aren't paying their tax or aren't paying enough. So what I want to get at is if you want to legally lower your tax or set up a business, an offshore company somewhere, or you want to get a benefit from somewhere, why don't you find a place that offers much better business or tax incentives than your home country? Why don't you find a place that has better beaches, that has a better lifestyle, that's cheaper, that you can set up shop with some kind of residency and reap all of the benefits? Again, unfortunately, if you're American or Eritrean, you're a bit screwed. I actually do know of 3 cases of people who have acquired a second passport and given up their American citizenship, have renounced because they just don't want to pay tax to the American government. Now, if you are American, there are some incentives. So there's something called the foreign earned income exclusion, where America will forego tax on the first 108,000 American dollars. But everything over that, if you've got a successful business, you still have to pay tax regardless of whether you're in the world you live. So, but what I'm trying to say is that there are options out there. All you have to do is start Googling for things like digital nomad visas, countries that have easy residencies, countries that have low tax for residents, and you'll find something that fits in with how you want to personally live. Don't move somewhere just because of the tax breaks, though. For example, Saudi Arabia has 0% tax. It's not a place that I'd want to move for the lifestyle. It's 45 to 50 degrees every day. It's a desert and it's hot. And if you're a woman, it's probably not going to be the best place in the world to live for your civil rights. I've met a bunch of people that have lived somewhere just because the tax breaks or the business breaks are great. It's not worth paying less tax if you hate where you live. It's not worth it. And it's one of the things that I constantly say to people when they're like, well, you talk about lowering your legal tax with offshore companies or moving somewhere. Why do you live in Iceland? It's because I love this place. There's always something that you can do in your home country, whether it's setting up a company, whether it's managing your investments or your structures wisely. There's always something that you can do in your home country to legally lower your tax. Don't just move somewhere for tax breaks or business breaks. You need to love what you're doing. And that's another big part of business and achieving ultimate freedom. If you hate what you're doing and you're trying to think about every tax dollar or every cent that you're making, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Freedom, again, this whole seminar that I'm talking to you about is about freedom. The freedom to choose where you live. And what can happen is I know some people that have like 7 offshore companies and they've structured all these companies in such a specific way to pay almost no tax in their home country. But what they're trading off is that they now have to do 7 tax returns every year. They have 7 lots of accounting, 7 lots of accountants and lawyers to pay for, 7 lots of time that they have to invest in managing those businesses. Is that worth saving 10% tax a year for all of that time that you have to then put in it? It's not. And this is one of the reasons why, I wouldn't live here to pay 47% tax, but setting up a company and paying 20% tax in Iceland and paying myself a minimal salary, that's worth it to me. So there's always something that you can do. Now, the last thing that I want to talk to you about in terms of your freedom strategy is investing. Now, one thing that I want to sort of make very clear to people is that if you are the kind of person that's relying on your retirement fund or an investment fund or a 401k, I'm going to hit you with a bit of a hard truth right now, is that there is a very good chance that that is not going to be there when it's time for you to retire. Most people think that our governments are going to take care of us and that all of this money that we've invested in our retirement fund is going to be there when we retire. And the simple fact is that that is not the case. Let me give you some very specific examples. The United States has just publicly said that the Treasury for Social Security is going to be bankrupt and out of money by the latest as 2034. Governments of Poland and Hungary and 3 other countries in Europe have seized pension funds from their citizens, some people in retirement, some people not, to pay back bad debts that the country has accrued, leaving many of these citizens with less than they would have expected to retire on. We are in one of the biggest economic bubbles on earth that I think that has ever happened. So if you think that I'm being scaremongering, suggesting that maybe the money that your government has set aside for you to retire on, or maybe the money that you have set aside to retire on is going to be there when you retire, there are many signs to point to the fact that that is not the case. And so I believe that if you're preparing for retirement or investing for your future or investing so you are absolutely free no matter what happens in your future, it's on you. It's absolutely on you. Do not rely on anyone else to give you that security. Now, this is such a hard thing for me to cover in a very short period of time, and we are running out of time because I have rambled a little bit. At the very least, you should be saving 10% of everything that you earn. Minimum 10% of absolutely everything that you earn, and that should be put aside like it doesn't exist in very stable investments. And by very stable investments, I say things like gold and silver and things like property, things that stand the test of time, not in exchange traded funds, not in stocks, because we've had many stock market collapses over the last 30 years of human history, and especially over the last 100. I don't trust the stock market for money that I can't afford to lose. So you should be saving at minimum 10% of your income and putting it in the absolute most stable investments that stand the test of time. And to me, there's only 2, which is precious metals like gold and silver and property. You should then ideally be saving another 10% to put in other investments that may be a little bit riskier, but that may pay you higher dividends. Things like exchange traded funds, things like potentially a little bit in cryptocurrency, things like business. Business to me is the greatest investment that you could ever make, because for me, it's the thing that's paid the biggest dividends. Can be risky. So 10% of everything you earn, put back into your business, help it grow, nurture that thing, nurture that little seed and turn it into a huge flower or a huge tree over time. The other thing that you should be doing is looking offshore for much better investment opportunities than in your home country. Banks, I remember when I was a kid, you could put money in a bank account in Australia and the bank would pay you about 7% interest on that money a year, 7%. The best you can get in Australia now is about 1%. The best you can get in America is 0.6% to 1%. There is a better way than in your bank account to put your money. I also believe that you should have as little money as you can comfortably stomach in cash, that your money should be in other investments that will either be there to secure your future or that are earning you money. I think having money in a bank account is the worst thing that you could do. But if you do want to have money in a bank account for your future, it should be likely somewhere else, especially if you're in the West. And also diversify. If you've got 100% of your investment portfolio, and if you've got 100% of your investment portfolio just in gold and silver, it's stable, but I still think it's a stupid idea. You've got 100% in crypto, really stupid idea. You've got 100% of that in stocks or ETFs or bonds, really stupid idea. Diversify not only your investments, but diversify the countries that those investments are in. You only have to look back at the last 10 years of human history and look at cases like Cyprus, where during an economic collapse, the Cypriot government seized anything above, I think it was 100,000 euros in everyone's bank account, gone overnight. That could happen to you. Don't say that it can't happen, and don't think that just because your country's been good for the last 10 or 20 years, that it's going to be good for the next 10. The last 2 years has showed us the world can change in an instant. The biggest financial collapse in our lifetimes only happened in 2008, the housing crisis in the United States, which had an effect over the entire world. It collapsed the economies of Iceland, where I live, and it collapsed the economies of Greece, as well as put pretty much the entire world into a recession. If you don't think it can happen to you, look at human history. Those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. So diversify your investments, save at least 10% and put that in very stable investments. Diversify your investments not only in your portfolio, but by the country that your investments are held in. Keep yourself as safe and secure as you possibly can, and focus on diversifying for your retirement. Even if you're 21, there's a good chance that your government will not save you. So with that out of the way, I hope I've gotten as much information in as I possibly could in the last 50 minutes. I would love to answer some questions. I'm sure that there are questions. So thank you all for your time. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I hope you got some value. But yeah, if we've got time for questions, Ashley, throw them at me.
We do indeed.
And by the way, I'm drinking wine. I didn't drink. I held it off until the end, but yeah.
Well, we started at about 9 a.m. my time, so I'll maybe at least wait until the end of this to have my first glass.
Yeah, it's after 5 p.m. for me, so it's relevant.
Perfect. Well, lots of comments and questions coming in. People are really grateful to have this level of information, the practical tips, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot to squeeze into a very short period of time. We do have a handful of questions, and there have been a couple that have come in specifically related to digital nomad visas. And I'm not certain if this is something that you're familiar with, but I guess these specific types of visas are coming up in different parts of the world, and we've got at least one or two folks who are curious about whether or not you'd be able to renew a digital nomad visa by doing visa runs, or is it a one-time thing like the work and travel visas? So maybe that's just a specific element of the questions. I'm wondering if that's something that you have any insights on, the digital nomad visas versus work and travel.
Yeah, so some people, I recommend, if you are looking at digital nomad visas, don't just Google digital nomad visas. The other thing you should be Googling to find what is available is entrepreneur visas. So generally with most countries, a business visa is pretty much more high level. It's like, for example, Russia has a business visa. You have to invest 130,000 US dollars in the country's economy, and then they'll give you a visa for, I think it's up to 5 years to start a company there, but you have to employ people in Russia, and so on and so forth. Digital nomad visas or entrepreneur visas are generally for individuals, but some countries brand them differently. So that's why I recommend people search for both. Now, depending on where you live, and this is critical, depending on where your existing citizenship is from, will depend on the opportunities that you have for a digital nomad visa, because some countries restrict digital nomad visas for other certain countries, but also will depend on what you can do when it expires. Generally, you won't be able to just do border runs, especially in countries like Croatia or Estonia that are within the European Union or Schengen zone. They're really strict on that. Obviously I have residency in Iceland permanently, so I can do whatever I want in Europe. But if you're not a European citizen, if you're a European citizen, it doesn't matter, and you're looking for an entrepreneur visa in Europe, it doesn't matter because you can do whatever you want anyway. But have a look at what the requirements are when that ends, or what your options are when that visa ends for your specific circumstances. So I know Croatia in certain regards will allow you to extend based on certain circumstances, either transition into a different visa or re-extend that visa. Estonia is a little bit more difficult. They will allow you to do it if you, based on certain business criteria. Thailand has some entrepreneur visa options. So does Georgia, not the American state Georgia, but the country of Georgia. The country of Georgia it's probably one of the next places that I'm going to go. And Georgia's entrepreneur visa, the tax rate is 1%. So that's obviously very attractive for many people. Georgia is also the country that invented red wine. So go there for that, apparently. And it is extremely cheap and extremely beautiful from what I've heard. I'm planning on going by the end of the year. So there are options. So my recommendation, just Google digital nomad visas or entrepreneur visas and see what's available to you.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's fascinating because I think there are a lot of options that are cropping up that, if you're able to find the relevant information, would actually work very well for what you're looking for. So we have a few other questions. Any advice on how to travel with multiple passports? So, just the actual logistics of that. What do you suggest?
Well, every country has its own rules. So, for example, my home country of Australia, Australia basically states that if you have multiple citizenships, I don't know if it's a legal requirement, but Australia they say that you must enter and leave Australia on your Australian passport.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there are also certain things that people try to do. So, I mean, I've heard of many people and know of one person personally that had dual citizenship. Neither of them were from a European country and was basically living in Europe, entering for 3 months, leaving on one passport, entering with another. Because in Europe, you can stay for 90 days out of every 180 days. So they were basically living in Europe permanently, just with 2 passports, alternating.
Right.
That person eventually got caught and booted out of the Schengen zone for 3 years, I think. So even if you have multiple passports, you're not really allowed to do that. And I would recommend, like, again, going back to like the tax thing and entering and leaving countries, like there are always ways that you can game the system. There are always ways. Just like fucking don't, pardon my French, but just don't, because eventually you will get caught. Like with all the knowledge that I have on reducing tax, there are so many things that I know that I could do that I could probably be sneaky on and hide from the government. But I know eventually they will find out. And not only will I have to pay back all that tax, in most cases with interest, I'll probably get hit with huge fines. Mm-hmm. I recommend, like, whether it's entering or leaving countries or lowering your tax or whatever it is, take absolutely every legal avenue that you have, because those avenues are there to be taken advantage of. Just don't cross that line, because you will get caught out eventually, and it's probably going to cost you more money. In some cases, it could get you thrown in prison.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, to your point earlier, there are so many legal ways to do this, as evidenced by global corporations and very wealthy individuals, at least within the United States, which has been in the news a lot lately. How legally our wealthiest individuals have paid no taxes. Don't put yourself at additional risk when you don't have to.
Yeah.
So one slightly more philosophical question from Paula. Do you think that doing a business the way that you did when you were in your early 20s, do you think that same path would work today, just based on what's changed with the global landscape and geopolitics and that kind of thing?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to be the first adopter with something. So I basically founded what was one of the first digital marketing agencies in the world. But which is nothing special really. But what got me to success is that I had no money when I started my first company, none. And so I was like, how do I market this business to become huge globally with no money? Now, my answer was press and publicity. And at that time, I knew nothing about PR, nothing about publicity, nothing about generating press. But I basically focused really hard on learning. I found every free article that I could, every free teacher giving out any information on PR or press or publicity and how to write a press release. And it worked very quickly for me. I found stories in things that I was doing, some 23-year-old kid in his bedroom, starting this, doing this thing that had never been done before, or doing this thing in a different way. Right. You send out a press release and, 40, 50% of the time, nothing happens. And then the rest of the time, something happens if you're great at writing a press release. Like, that was my special thing. I was great at getting the news to write about me. and it's free advertising. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that what I did and the way that I did it, but I actually think there's more opportunities, especially I think there's more opportunity to promote yourself without money online than there was when I started 13 years ago. I think there's much more opportunity to do that. So I actually think in many ways it's much easier to get a path to success. The thing that I think is difficult is so many people are trying to do the same thing that so many other people are doing. Change it up a bit.
Yeah.
Differentiate yourself. Even if the thing that you're good at is, going back to the really crappy example I used at the start, you're really great at knitting and you want to do knitting tutorials or whatever. I'm sure there's a lot of people doing that. Find a way to do that in a way that no one has done before. Make yourself stand out. Over deliver to a point that no one has done yet. There is always a way to do better, be better, and to serve people better. And that is the way to success.
I so appreciate that. And I've noticed just in producing and hosting these events with creators, entrepreneurs, folks from all different fields and disciplines, and in my own work. So I was mentioning to you before, I worked at TED and did a lot of speaker coaching and working with individuals on how best to convey the core idea of their talk, for example. And the common thread among all these different creators, the advice that you're giving right now, the way that I would coach speakers, is identifying what is the unique gift that you are better able to give your audience than anyone else. And there is something within your skill and ability to knit that you can offer in a way that nobody else can offer. And being able to articulate that, I think, is, yeah, especially in a world where there are so many different paths to self-promotion, being able to articulate that is pretty critical to getting started. At least, as you know, that's the advice that it seems really consistent among creators and entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yeah, I actually want to just, if it's okay, to answer.
Yeah,
I've
please.
seen like 3 people mentioning something about Canada, and does it fall into the category of worldwide tax? No. So to answer, those 3 people, it's literally the only 2 countries on the face of the planet that tax their citizens on their worldwide income for life, if you're a citizen, is Eritrea and the United States. They're the only 2 countries. But in almost every circumstance on every country in the world, apart from what I illustrated, that like if I had a company in Hong Kong, but I was operating that from Australia, Australia would consider that country is operated in Australia and you need to pay tax here. So there are some things you have to think about. But if you move yourself and you live somewhere full time, if you're Canadian, and I was actually recently having this discussion with a Canadian friend of mine who's very interested in all of this stuff. He doesn't want to give up his Canadian citizenship. He wants to become a dual citizen. He doesn't want to give up his Canadian passport, and I wouldn't if I was in his situation. I would never give up my Australian passport. If you move yourself somewhere else permanently, you're, in most cases, you are fine. Unless, unfortunately, I know there's a lot of people in here that are Americans. Your only way is to claim the foreign earned income exclusion, which is, I think, about $108,000, but everything over that you will, or renounce your citizenship, which you can't do unless you have another one. But yeah, I know of one fairly prominent figure, but 2 people personally who have actually done that. So it is an option.
It is an option. So based on some of these insights that you've offered, and we have so many people in the chat who have said, I pre-ordered the course, I can't wait for the course. I would love to just kind of wrap up with maybe, Leon, if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of insight into some of the additional information that you're able to go into more depth in for the course, and what that learning experience will be like for folks.
Yeah, so the course really focuses on those main 4 pillars that I've spoken about. So there are 5 main sections to the course. There is the income section, there is the structures and tax section, there is the global citizenship section, there's the investing section. Each one of these sections obviously goes into considerable more detail. Some of the videos there's only about 6 videos in each section, but some of them are close to an hour or an hour long. The course is going to have about 30 videos, but there's also about 50 pieces of supplementary material attached to the course. Things like reports, things like extra information in PDFs. Like, these are the best opportunities for residencies right now, things like that. So it's primarily video, but then there's about 50 additional pieces of information. Something else that comes with it that Sorelle and I haven't mentioned to anyone is that there were 2 sections of the course that we didn't think we could cover in enough detail, which is when we speak about the income generation section, there's a section on teaching people how to use paid advertising and PR and publicity to really boost their business. Now, in one of Sorelle's other courses, the Public Figure Bootcamp, that we did 33 videos just on those 2 subjects out of the 100 and something videos in that entire course. People are also going to get all 33 of those videos as a part of this course. And we haven't mentioned that to anyone yet. So there's technically about 60 videos in the course, 50 pieces of supplementary material. Where I think people will get more value, though, is the course also comes with a membership. We have had almost, as I record this now, 1,900 people sign up for the pre-sale. So you will be part of a membership with 1,900 other freedom seekers who are all looking to do the same thing that you're doing. Generate an independent income, get new citizenships and residencies, sort out your international investing and your global structures, offshore banking and companies. So that is all of those people are going to be there for you to communicate with. As part of the membership, we're going to be giving you about 3 to 4 info drops per week, which are things like new opportunities for citizenship and residency, new opportunities for investing that we're taking part in, the things that Sorelle and I are personally doing in our own lives to increase our levels of freedom, whether that's by income generation or new opportunities that we are going after. All of that will be coming as part of the membership as well. There will also be 2 live seminars per month with Sorelle and I, one where we do business critiques of people in the community, and another one which will be about 1 to 2 hours of us talking about the most important opportunities that we see in the world of finance and freedom coming every month. So the membership, you get the course, but you also get the membership. And as part of the pre-sale, you will get lifetime access to the course and the membership, whereas anyone who buys after October 1st, because of how constantly we're updating it, will have to buy a yearly subscription at $787 per year. So anyone that buys before October 1st will get it for life. You'll never need to pay anything ever again. This is by far the biggest thing that Sorelle and I have ever done. And another thing that Sorelle and I have not talked about as well is the main reason that we started Abundantia. And even though our aim has always been via the podcast that's coming next month and the YouTube channel and the newsletter that we have already, is we want 95% of what we give away for free. But the main reason that we, obviously have to monetize a part of the business is because our aim is to give up absolutely everything else that we are doing to make money, because we want to focus on this, because we think the aim of giving as many people as possible ultimate freedom is we can't think of anything else that is more beneficial to dedicate our lives to. So this is we really believe in this.
I so appreciate the intentionality behind the structure and the community that you all have created, and can tell from the comments that this is something that folks are really excited about. And I can definitely say, just from experience and working with these types of courses, the ability to connect on a deeper level with a community that is similarly minded and interested and has similar questions or experiences that you can learn from is really, worth its weight in gold, and translates to exactly what you're describing here, which is ultimate freedom. So thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead.
And I just saw quickly, there's 2 questions about the price of the course is differently through us as well as through Teachable. So yes, that's true. We have given, Teachable has asked us to give something special to people that are on this seminar. So the standard price for the pre-sale is $550, but anyone that buys through the Teachable link, it should be $391 or something like that. So if you buy it through the Teachable link, that's because you're getting a special discount. And if you can't use the link for some reason, if you use the code Teachable at checkout, you'll get the same discount. So that's where the discrepancy is.
Thanks for clarifying that. And just so the audience knows, the link that Leon's mentioning is pinned to the top of the YouTube page here, and I've dropped it in the comments a few times, so you have access to it there pretty easily. Want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like I mentioned at the top of the session, there will be a replay available for this. So, and I fully plan on going back and rewatching and trying to absorb even more of the details that you shared, Leon. So much value in such a short period of time. I really appreciate your efforts to convey as much as you could in such a short period of time, and our audience does as well, I can tell from the comments.
Yeah,
so
and it's really our pleasure. And I'd just like to say to people, if you do ever have any questions or whatever, you know, the place that Sorelle and I are most active is on the Sorelle Amore Finance YouTube channel. If you ever want have a quick question or something, drop it under a YouTube video, and we really try our best to get back to as many people as possible on the channel. So, you know, we're definitely not saying that like you have to buy the course and the membership. You know, of course we'd love you to, but our aim is really to help as many people as possible, and that's why we give out so much free content.
So you heard it there. Go check out the YouTube channel. That's where you can connect and engage with Leon and Sorelle. Check out the course page that's linked here for additional information and a special discount through Discover. We're so grateful to have had your wisdom and generosity with us here today, Leon. Hope that you will join us again. As we can tell, there's plenty more to learn about and to dive into. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. You'll have access to this replay. We'll send you an email that's got it. You'll also be able to view it again on our YouTube channel, which is the page that you're on right now. So check that out. Let us know if you have any questions, and we will look forward to seeing you next time, maybe from a different locale.
Maybe Russia next, then Estonia, then Switzerland, then Finland. So I've got a lot of travel coming in the next 4 months. Unfortunately, everywhere that I'm going is cold.
Cold. Pack a scarf. Pack a scarf.
I will. Thank you so much. Thank you really much, Ashley, and thank you for everyone that tuned in. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I hope you learned something. Thank you. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Bye. Bye.